In just 47 seconds, one of Britain's most beloved comedians went from laughing on a daytime talk show to ripping off his microphone and storming off set in absolute fury. What started as lighthearted banter about comedy and cancel culture exploded into a full-blown screaming match that left the entire studio in shocked silence. Denise Welch launched an attack so vicious, so personal, that Ricky Gervais did something he's never done in his entire career. He walked out mid-interview, leaving millions of viewers at home absolutely stunned. The tension was there from the very first second Ricky Gervais walked onto the Loose Women set. You could feel it. The audience clapped politely as he settled into his chair, flashing that signature, mischievous grin that's made him famous around the world. The other panelists smiled warmly, clearly excited to have such a big name on the show. But Denise Welch sat there with her arms crossed, her face like thunder, barely acknowledging his arrival. She didn't clap. She didn't smile. She just stared at him with this cold, hard look that immediately told everyone watching that something was brewing beneath the surface. The conversation started innocently enough. One of the other hosts asked Ricky about his upcoming tour, and he launched into a funny story about rehearsals going wrong. The audience laughed. The other panelists chuckled along. But Denise sat there stone-faced, tapping her fingers on the desk impatiently, as if she was waiting for the perfect moment to pounce. And that moment came sooner than anyone expected. "So, Ricky," Denise interrupted, her voice sharp and cutting through the laughter like a knife. "Let's talk about your comedy, shall we? Because I think we need to address the elephant in the room here." Ricky's smile faltered just slightly. "All right," he said carefully, clearly sensing danger. "What elephant would that be?" "The fact that you seem to think it's perfectly acceptable to make jokes at the expense of vulnerable communities." Denise shot back, her eyes narrowing. "Trans people, minorities, people who are already suffering. You punch down constantly, and then you hide behind this idea of free speech, like it's some kind of shield." The studio went quiet. The other hosts shifted uncomfortably in their seats, exchanging nervous glances. The audience stopped laughing. Everyone could feel the temperature in the room drop about 10 degrees. Ricky leaned back in his chair, his expression hardening. "That's not what I do," he replied, his voice measured but firm. "I make jokes about ideas, about ideology, about things people choose to believe. I don't punch down at vulnerable people. If you actually watched my work instead of reading headlines about it, you'd know that." "Oh, I've watched your work," Denise snapped, leaning forward aggressively. "I've seen you up there on stage getting cheap laughs by mocking people who are just trying to live their lives. And frankly, I think it's disgusting. You're a bully, Ricky. A playground bully with a Netflix special." The other hosts looked absolutely horrified. One of them tried to interject, to calm things down, but Denise held up her hand sharply, silencing her. She wasn't done, not even close. Ricky's jaw clenched. You could see the anger starting to build behind his eyes, but he was still trying to keep his composure. "Listen," he said, his voice tight. "Comedy has always pushed boundaries. It's supposed to make people uncomfortable sometimes. That's the whole point. If you just want everyone to sit around and say nice things that everyone agrees with, that's not comedy. That's a bloody church service." "Don't lecture me about comedy," Denise shot back, her voice rising. "I know what comedy is. What you do isn't comedy. It's cruelty dressed up as jokes. And the fact that you can't see the difference is terrifying." "What's terrifying," Ricky countered, his own voice getting louder now, "is that people like you want to control what everyone else can laugh at. You want to be the joke police, deciding what's acceptable and what isn't. That's not how art works. That's not how free expression works." "Free expression?" Denise laughed bitterly. "You call it free expression. I call it using your massive platform to make already marginalized people feel even worse about themselves. You hide behind freedom of speech, but really you're just scared that the world is changing and you can't keep up." That hit a nerve. Ricky's face flushed red. "Scared? You think I'm scared? I've been doing this for 30 years. I've heard every criticism, faced every mob, dealt with every attempt to shut me down. And I'm still here, still selling out arenas, still making the comedy I believe in. So, no, Denise, I'm not scared of anything." "Well, maybe you should be," Denise practically shouted. Maybe you should be scared of the harm you're causing. Maybe you should actually think about the consequences of your words instead of just collecting your paycheck and moving on to the next offensive bit. The other hosts were desperately trying to get control of the situation now. One of them suggested they take a commercial break. Another tried to change the subject entirely. But both Ricky and Denise were locked in now, staring at each other like two boxers in a ring, neither willing to back down first. I think very carefully about every word I say, Ricky said through gritted teeth. Every joke, every bit, every special. I craft it carefully. I think about the ideas I'm challenging, the points I'm making. Just because you don't understand the nuance doesn't mean it isn't there. Nuance? Denise scoffed. There's no nuance in what you do. It's just mean-spirited garbage designed to appeal to the worst parts of your audience. You're not some brave truth-teller. You're just a middle-aged man who's angry that society is finally holding people accountable for their words. Accountable? Ricky's voice was getting dangerously loud now. You mean silenced, you mean censored, you mean controlled. That's what you want. You want everyone to think exactly like you do. To have the same opinions, the same beliefs, the same sacred cows that can never be questioned or laughed at. I want people to have some basic human decency, Denise shouted back. Is that really too much to ask? That you don't use your fame and your platform to make vulnerable people feel like crap? I don't do that, Ricky yelled, slamming his hand on the armrest of his chair. How many times do I have to say it? I mock ideas. I mock pretension. I mock people who take themselves too seriously. I don't target vulnerable people. That's your interpretation because you want me to be the villain in your little narrative. It's not my interpretation. Denise was fully shouting now, her face red with anger. It's the reality that thousands of people experience when they hear your jokes, when they feel attacked, when they feel dehumanized. But you don't care about that, do you? You just care about getting laughs and making money. One of the other hosts finally managed to get a word in. Perhaps we should all just take a breath and... No, Ricky cut her off, his voice cold and hard. No, I want to hear this. I want to hear exactly what Denise thinks she knows about my intentions, my character, and my work, despite never having met me before today and clearly approaching this with a completely closed mind. I know enough, Denise said, her voice dripping with contempt. I know that you're a relic of an older, crueler time in comedy. I know that you represent everything that's wrong with the entertainment industry. And I know that people like you need to be called out, challenged, and frankly, shut down. That was it. That was the line. You could see it on Ricky's face the moment she said, shut down. His expression changed from angry to absolutely done. He shook his head slowly, a bitter smile crossing his face. Shut down, he repeated quietly. There it is. That's what this is really about, isn't it? You don't want debate. You don't want discussion. You want to shut down anyone who doesn't agree with you. Well, you know what, Denise? You can't shut me down. But you can definitely make this the worst interview experience I've ever had. Oh, poor Ricky. Denise mocked. Did I hurt your feelings? Did I make you uncomfortable? How does it feel to be on the receiving end for once? Ricky stood up abruptly, and the studio went dead silent. Everyone froze, watching to see what would happen next. He reached up and unclipped his microphone with sharp, angry movements. You know what? I don't need this, he said, his voice shaking with barely controlled rage. I came here thinking we could have an actual conversation. A real discussion about comedy, about art, about where the lines are. But you didn't want that. You wanted a fight. You wanted to humiliate me on television to score points with your audience. Well, congratulations, Denise. You got your fight. Running away? Denise taunted. That's very brave of you. I'm not running, Ricky snapped back, dropping his microphone on the chair. I'm leaving. There's a difference. I don't have conversations with people who've already decided I'm evil before I've even opened my mouth. I don't waste my time with people who think shutting down opposing voices is somehow heroic. This is unbelievable, Denise said, looking at the camera. This is what happens when you challenge these people. They can dish it out, but they absolutely cannot take it. Ricky turned back to face her. His finger pointed at her accusingly. You haven't challenged me. You've attacked me. There's a massive difference. A challenge is when you engage with someone's ideas, their arguments, their work. An attack is when you call them a bully, a relic, and say they should be shut down. You haven't engaged with a single thing I've actually said or done. You've just thrown insults and accusations. Because your work speaks for itself, Denise shouted. My work does speak for itself, Ricky shouted back. To millions of people around the world who understand it, who get it, who appreciate that comedy can be challenging and provocative without being hateful. But you've decided that your interpretation is the only correct one, and anyone who disagrees is a monster. The other hosts were completely frozen now, not even attempting to intervene anymore. This had gone so far beyond their control that there was nothing they could do but watch it unfold. You want to know what the real problem is? Ricky continued, his voice now filled with genuine frustration rather than just anger. The real problem is that people like you have appointed yourselves the guardians of everyone else's feelings. You've decided that you know best what everyone should be offended by, what everyone should laugh at, what everyone should think. And anyone who steps outside of those boundaries is immediately labeled as dangerous, as harmful, as someone who needs to be stopped. It's authoritarian, it's controlling, and it's the death of creativity. Oh, please. Denise rolled her eyes. Stop being so dramatic. Nobody's trying to control you. We're just asking you to be a decent human being. By your definition of decent, Ricky shot back, which apparently includes ambushing guests on your show and verbally attacking them for their work. Yeah, Denise, you're really leading by example here on what decent behavior looks like. I'm holding you accountable, Denise insisted. You're grandstanding, Ricky yelled. You're performing for your audience, trying to look like some kind of brave warrior standing up to the big bad comedian. But really, you're just showing everyone watching that you can't handle ideas that challenge your worldview. You can't handle comedy that doesn't fit into your neat little box of what's acceptable. Denise stood up now too, matching his energy. Get out then. If you can't handle being questioned about your work, then leave. Run back to your echo chamber where everyone tells you how brilliant you are. Gladly, Ricky said coldly. I'd rather spend 5 minutes in traffic than another second in this toxic environment. Toxic? Denise laughed harshly. You're calling me toxic? That's rich coming from you. Yes, Denise. Toxic. This whole setup was toxic from the start. You invited me here under false pretenses, pretending you wanted a conversation, when really you just wanted to ambush me on live television. You wanted your moment, your viral clip, your chance to take down someone you disagree with. Well, you got it. I hope it was worth it. It was absolutely worth it, Denise said defiantly. Someone needed to say these things to your face instead of letting you waltz onto shows and get treated like some kind of comedy god. Ricky shook his head, a look of genuine disappointment crossing his face. You know what the sad thing is? We probably agree on more things than we disagree on. I bet if we sat down like actual adults and had a real conversation, we'd find common ground. But you never wanted that. You wanted a villain. And you decided that was going to be me before I even walked through that door. Don't try to take the moral high ground now, Denise said bitterly. You're walking off the show. That's on you. Yeah, it is on me, Ricky agreed. And I'm fine with that. I'd rather walk off a show with my integrity intact than sit here and be lectured by someone who thinks they have the monopoly on morality. Enjoy your show, Denise. I'm sure you'll have plenty to say about this once I'm gone. With that, Ricky Gervais turned and started walking off the set. The cameras followed him as he moved quickly toward the exit, his expression stormy. You could hear Denise calling after him. That's right, run away. Show everyone who you really are. Ricky stopped at the edge of the stage and turned back one last time. I know exactly who I am, Denise. The question is, do you? Because from where I'm standing, you just bullied a guest on your show and then acted like the victim when they wouldn't sit there and take it. Think about that. And then he was gone, disappearing through the exit door, leaving the studio in absolute chaos. The other host sat there in stunned silence, clearly unsure of what to say or do. Denise stood there, her chest heaving, still fired up from the confrontation. The audience didn't know whether to applaud or stay quiet. Some people were whispering to each other. Others were pulling out their phones, clearly already recording or texting about what they'd just witnessed. Well, Denise finally said, turning to face the camera directly, I think that showed everyone exactly what we're dealing with. Someone who can dish it out but absolutely cannot take it. One of the other hosts tried to smooth things over. That was certainly intense. Perhaps we should— No, Denise interrupted. I'm not going to pretend that didn't just happen or try to sweep it under the rug. What you all just saw is what happens when people who are used to never being challenged finally face some pushback. They can't handle it. They storm off. They play the victim. It's pathetic, really. But even as she spoke, you could see some doubt creeping into her expression, some awareness that maybe, just maybe, things had gone too far. The other hosts were clearly uncomfortable, exchanging worried looks. The production team in the background looked panicked, probably trying to figure out how to handle this disaster. We're going to take a break, one of the hosts finally managed to say, her voice shaky. When we come back, well, we'll figure that out. The show cut to commercial, but the damage was done. In living rooms across the country, people were rewinding their recordings, capturing clips, posting reactions online. What was supposed to be a standard celebrity interview had turned into one of the most explosive television moments in recent memory. And it had all happened in less than 15 minutes from start to finish. Backstage, witnesses later reported seeing Ricky Gervais leaving the building immediately, declining to speak to anyone from the show. His team gathered around him protectively as he headed to his car, his face still flushed with anger. Inside the studio, the remaining hosts tried to regroup, but the energy was completely shattered. There was no coming back from what had just happened. Denise Welch sat in her chair during the commercial break, and for the first time since the confrontation started, she looked uncertain. The righteous anger that had fueled her throughout the argument seemed to drain away, replaced by something that looked almost like regret. But it was too late. The damage was done. The confrontation was over. And Ricky Gervais was gone, leaving behind one of the most dramatic walkouts in British television history. When the show came back from the break, Denise tried to continue as normal, moving on to other topics. But her heart clearly wasn't in it anymore. The other hosts did their best to carry on, but everyone watching could tell that the entire show had been derailed by what had just happened. The explosive confrontation between Denise Welch and Ricky Gervais had overshadowed everything else, turning what should have been a regular episode into an absolute train wreck that nobody would forget anytime soon. The studio audience sat in uncomfortable silence, processing what they'd witnessed. Many of them had come expecting a fun, light show with a famous comedian. Instead, they'd gotten a front-row seat to one of the most hostile celebrity interviews ever broadcast. As the show limped toward its conclusion, with everyone involved clearly just wanting it to be over, one thing was absolutely certain. This was a moment that would be talked about, analyzed, and debated for a very long time to come. And it all started with just 47 seconds of tension that exploded into a full-scale confrontation that ended with one of Britain's most successful comedians ripping off his microphone and walking out, leaving chaos in his wake.